I'm Edwin Warfield. I'm the publisher of Citybiz. As lawyer Cooper Cohen Braunfeld continues to actively grow their cannabis practice, we are speaking today with attorney Gary Kaminsky, a new member of their cannabis practice that serves as the chief regulatory advisor for the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp. And we're also speaking with partner Roger Braunfeld, a founder of the firm who helped to launch and continues to grow RCCB's substantial cannabis practice. Roger is also actively involved in strategic opportunities for the firm, including the creation of a $140 million alternative investment platform. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So Roger, tell us about RCCB and how you became involved in the cannabis industry.
I'll start with RCCB. I want to smile as an answer to how I got involved in the cannabis industry. But let's start with RCCB. So this happens to be our 10-year anniversary since forming the firm. 4 founders came together to start this firm. We started this firm with the idea that we wanted to do very sophisticated work, but more importantly, we wanted to like the people that we work with in the office and the clients we work for. And we never would have dreamed that we would be almost 60 attorneys to date. But using that philosophy of really smart people who like each other and like their clients, we feel that's one of our biggest edges. And in addition to that, we kind of take this attitude that the most important people for us to empower are the people that work for us. And if we can make them great, our clients are going to be very happy. And our clients, the way I look at it, are our shareholders, our investors. And they become our best marketers by doing a great job. So we've been able to expand in multiple practice groups. We're essentially, in my opinion, a full-service business firm. And we've been growing based on maintaining our culture, even through COVID, which has had its challenges. And so how do we get involved in the cannabis industry? Well, it would be around 2013, 14, we got involved in it. And if people remember back then, there are not a lot of law firms that would even touch the space because of the legalities of it. But it was a space where you needed very sophisticated advice because you're essentially entering a world which had some rules, federal and state, but there were no norms or no rules. So that's when you need attorneys, in my opinion. You don't have forms to be very creative. And so we started representing people going after licenses, people doing deals, people raising capital in the space back then, because they were just looking for someone to help them. And through that journey, we've grown a significant national cannabis practice, just helping all the needs of a cannabis company. And it brings my friend Gary, who I've known since before we started the firm. He came on to kind of enjoy this ride of building our firm and our cannabis practice and the businesses that we touch.
Can you tell us how you were originally connected with Gary?
Steve Bloom.
In a word.
Yeah, I mean, so I was connected. So we have so Gary used to run he used to be the chief compliance officer of a place called Susquehanna International Group. And one of our mutual friends was one of the founders of Susquehanna International Group. And I guess around 2009, 2010, he thought it would be a good idea for us to connect. And so we connected, and we have a lot of common. We love music. We love doing sophisticated things. We're geeks when it comes to the law, and we really bonded over those things.
And so, Gary, tell us about your background.
So I'm an SEC enforcement attorney by training. I started my career in the late 80s in Washington, busting people for insider trading and market manipulation. You probably, Ed, remember Ivan Boesky and Drexel. But I worked on those investigations as well as some other high-profile ones. And after I got done with my government service, I joined briefly Deckard, which is a law firm in their Washington office, in their white-collar defense department. And one of the things I did was bring in a client, which was Susquehanna, which Roger mentioned, who I had recovered money for when I was at the SEC because they were on the other side of some of the insider trading cases that I brought. And they convinced me to move up to Philadelphia and be their in-house compliance officer and counsel. And it was a very sophisticated trading firm, still is, but much larger now. And I was almost like Robert De Niro in Casino, walking a trading floor, setting rules, um, and trying to keep the firm out of trouble. But one thing I really learned was the art of facilitating lawful money making, because when you're dealing with extremely smart people who are navigating aggressive arbitrage trades, you need to work with them to find ways for them to do that. If you, as a compliance officer, when they come into your office and tell you that they're going to do XYZ trade, and you immediately say no because you don't understand what it is, they'll never come back. And you'll be like that compliance officer in the movie Boiler Room, where they start throwing things at you and making fun of you. On the other hand, if you tell them right out of the gate, yeah, it's fine to do because you want to curry favor, every regulator in the country is going to be calling you because the footprint is so large. So I really learned the art of saying, let me get back to you, and navigating the regulations and finding a way to do the trades they wanted to do in a lawful way. And the reason I go into that detail is because it really was the forebearing for what I ended up doing in the cannabis space. So one of the things I did navigate at Susquehanna was a particular arbitrage trade that was very valuable, private investment in public equity called PIPES. And we were one of the first desks to be aggressive in the Reg D and Reg S area. And it was a very legal intensive strategy. We figured out a way to do it legally, and it was so profitable that I left with the head trader and we formed a hedge fund to do it. And I became very involved in helping run that hedge fund for a number of years until the ARB disappeared. And then basically, when fast forward to 2008, when the world came to an end, so to speak, with Lehman falling down and Dodd-Frank came in, alternative investment fund managers needed to register as investment advisors. So I went back into the industry to basically advise clients on how to look and feel and act like a registered investment advisor. In essence, creating regulatory infrastructure. And I did that for a number of years. Roger and I worked together with a reg tech firm where we were selling software, which would help folks both here and in London. But then about 6 years ago, I was recruited by a private equity firm that wanted to invest in cannabis. And they said, we've seen your background and we think it would be great. And do you know anything about cannabis? And I said, well, I used to know a lot about cannabis in college, but I'm not so sure that that's relevant to what you're looking for. But they hired me to consult with them. And one of the first things I did was go out to a conference and speak on the regulatory issues surrounding cannabis. And it really caught my fancy because what I realized is that unlike other industries, the regulatory compliance side is completely intertwined with the business side. Because each of the regulations in the 38 separate states where they have different regulations for cannabis require navigation. And again, require the ability to find a way for a client to operate in a regulatory environment where, frankly, there's an arbitrage because there's federal illegality versus state legality. So it really was a great place for a cannabis geek like myself. So that's kind of how I got into the business. And for the last 6 years, I've worked at 4 different multi-state operators of cannabis in the United States and have really learned the vertical, the cultivation, extraction, and retail from both a legal, regulatory, but an operational side.
And what drew you to RCCB?
Well, as Roger mentioned, he and I are very good personal friends, and I've watched the firm grow. And frankly, we've talked for several years about me coming on in different ways, even before the cannabis business, because of my some of my securities background, which is I have kind of unique skill sets in areas of securities law. But most recently, about a year ago, I introduced Roger to a very good friend of mine who who I had formed a geek squad among the cannabis players, where we just have been talking for 4 or 5 years about different cannabis regulatory issues. He's a younger lawyer who's a superstar named Neil Wilner, and I recommended that Roger take a look at him. And as it didn't surprise me, Roger definitely liked Neil, and they hired him to be the co-head of their cannabis group. So really, for the last year, while I've been working at other places, I've been following their practice. Where I could, I've referred business to them, all with the idea that, this might be an area where I might want to play once I got done kind of working in-house. And eventually, by the end of last year, that became something that was of great interest to me. And Roger and I accelerated our discussions.
And just to interject on that, I mean, for me, looking at the cannabis industry, I think last year the recreational cannabis market was was $13 billion in the U.S. They say it's going up to $120 billion in annual revenue. Not next year, but sometime in the not too distant future. When I think about it, the two biggest limitations on that growth is legal, because you got to get a license and you got to be compliant. And every state, every municipality has its own rules with it. And capital, because the industry is starved with capital, and it's an industry, it's agriculture. So it's not like software where you can make code and you don't have to buy hard assets. It's very asset intensive to build a cannabis business. So that, from a big macro perspective, that's what really excited me about the industry from a law firm, because to get from 13 billion to 120 billion, there's going to be a lot of legal and compliance needs. And we actually have, with Gary coming on, one of the deepest benches in regulatory for cannabis. In addition to that, we're a full service business firm, so we can provide all the needs that a cannabis company needs, and their individuals, because we have tax planning and estate planning in addition to that. So it's a very exciting time for our firm, because whether it was strategic or luck, I'll claim strategic, but I also believe there's some luck there, where we have the team and the industry is going in the right macro direction to take advantage of it.
So, Gary and Roger, can you share with our readers and viewers your outlook on the cannabis industry going forward over the next year or two?
Sure. I'll take a crack at the macro side of it. I think we're going to continue to see legislative initiatives. I know that they are in the process of amending the Farm Bill, which legalized hemp, but has opened up a lot of kind of controversial business lines that weren't necessarily anticipated that move over into the marijuana side. And I also think Schumer is working on some bills. I think we'll see some movement on the banking side. But on a really macro level, I don't think we're going to see any legalization. This administration is not a fan of cannabis, and certainly there have been some things that have turned the clock back. We're seeing the capital markets being shut down even more to cannabis. We're seeing large firms like J.P. Morgan and Credit Suisse denying their large institutional investors the ability to custody cannabis stocks. We're seeing the exchanges not willing to list cannabis stocks. So I think we still have some time, but we just saw a major M&A transaction yesterday, a $2 billion one. So I think that the growth continues to be there despite maybe some speed bumps on the regulatory side.
And I think you're going to continue to see the cannabis market be capital starved, because there's not enough capital and they can't get banking. There's a lot of issues with it. I think you're also going to continue to see certain states roll out. People doing well in the new states. People like the Northeast is between New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. They're now open to take applications in. So you're kind of seeing people position themselves related to that. But I think the new thing that you're really going to see is you're going to start seeing some cannabis brands start to really emerge, because people have been looking for that. And I think the beverage space is ripe to start growing now. You're starting to see other states do it. We're seeing Gary and I are seeing a ton of activity in the beverage space, but like the traditional cannabis, like cultivator dispensary, the infrastructure to create the beverage hasn't even been created yet. So you're going to see a lot of investment and opportunities come out of that space, in my opinion.
And I would just amplify that. At Attach, we have the first cannabis beverage council. And so we pulled together the primary constituents in the cannabis industry in North America. And what we're learning is that we need to educate because it's a form factor that I don't think the regulators or even the industry completely understand. So I think, but one thing that is important, and I think this is why Roger made this point, is that the largest investors in cannabis are beverage companies. Constellation, one of the largest alcohol beverage companies in the world, put $5 billion into Canopy. And there are others. So I think there's no doubt beverage is the future of this industry.
And so, Gary, are there any final words that you'd like to share with us about your practice and your vision at the practice?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd like to think I bring to this practice and to the industry is a unique insight into the business side of it because I've worked, kind of been in the weeds, so to speak, on in several different companies, and I've watched it grow. I've interacted with regulators across the country through my relationship with Attach. I've met with attorneys general and FDA, USDA, DEA, White House on the regulatory issues. And I think that insight should be something that could really help our clients not only navigate the waters that are constantly changing, but also um, perform on their business side. Because I think Roger's unique in the sense that he and other of his partners are also invested in funds and have access to capital, and we're very much entrepreneurial. So we bring people together. So I think we can fulfill business needs as well.
Gary and Roger, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been fascinating to watch the RCCB growth over the last years. I mean, lots of firms claim that they're entrepreneurial, but I would say that you're one of the most entrepreneurial firms that I've encountered, and wish you the best of luck going forward. Keep us up to date as on your next actions and visions going forward. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.